Okay, Rabbi Sai. Geschmack. What a schluss to give a share to the Chashuv Kailul. This is going to be awesome. Okay, so we're going to be doing Bishul Akum. As we know, we're in a milchama, we're in a war, and we know that Iker part of the war is fought right over here in the Beis Medrash. And Mitzvah Shem, b'schus us learning Bishul Akum, we should be zeicha that the IDF, the Air Force, etc., should be able to be mevashal the Akum and blow up some Hamas b'schus this year. All right, so let's get rolling. So quickly rolling into the sugya, we have a Mishnah in Avodah Zarah Lamed Hey Amid Beis that lists things which are asur b'achila but aren't asur b'hana. On the list is shlokos, which ends up being the source of Bishul Akum, foods that are cooked by the guy would be asur for us to eat. The Gemara goes on to discuss that perhaps it's deraisa, but ends up concluding that it's derabanan, and the pasuk is just a asmachta. Now, the Gemara quotes in the name of Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak two qualifications that Bishul Akum only applies by things that are eaten raw, and therefore the reason for that presumably is if the guy things that aren't eaten raw. I apologize, because if the guy cooks something that is eaten raw, then he didn't do much for you, and that type of action is not going to bring kirva. It's not going to bring closeness to the guy. The other qualification being that the Isser only applies to something that is raya to be al shulchan melachim l'lafetz bayis hapas. So anything that is not right to be al shulchan melachim l'lafetz bayis hapas, it's not fitting to be on the king's table, the Isser of Bishul Akum does not apply. What is the reason for the Isser of Bishul Akum? Rashi in the Mishnah says the Isser is Mishum Chasanos, to prevent intermarriage. You get a little too haimish with the goyim, you're eating their food, that creates closeness, eventually could lead to intermarriage. The other reason, which is brought in Rashi in the Gemara, actually brings this reason, that Shem Nechel by Davar Tameh. Maybe you're going to come, the guy will feed you something not kosher. Now the question is, obviously everybody knew you're not allowed to eat something not kosher, so I think we discussed this last week as well, that the issue is when you become haimish with the guy, you become regular, you become close to the guy, so the first time your guard's up, the second time your guard's up, but eventually you're going to end up eating something that is not kosher. Okay, those are the reasons. Is one of the reasons a more ikar reason, a more tafel reason? So the Rambam says that the ikar reason is chasanos. And the Piskei Tshuva quotes the Marit, once again, that the ikar reason is mishum chasanos. There are some of the Rishonim quote both reasons, like Rashi, as I explained, and the Rambam that alludes that there's ikar and a tafel. Ikar being chasanos, to prevent intermarriage. Tafel being the reason of that maybe you're going to come eat something not kosher. Some of the Rishonim only quote chasanos. None of the Rishonim only quote Shema, that you might get something not kosher. So it seems clear that the primary issue is chasanos, but there is this additional reason of you may come to eat something not kosher. Now, as we go on, one of the questions may be, why is it that we see by Pasach, we only see the reason of chasanos, intermarriage, whereas when it comes to Bishul Akum, we also see this idea of eating something not kosher. So it might be that just back in the day, bread was a very simple product. Not nowadays, we have 60 ingredients, and therefore there wasn't so much of a issue of you'll come to eat something not kosher. Whereas when it comes to Bishul Akum, which is much more complex, cooking is much more complex, many more ingredients, it's easier for the guy to, so to speak, slip in a little not kosher, so that is the reason. Now, we're going to see that there is tremendous differences.
That whole thing falls away if he's
become ruggle and closeness.
If he's cooking by you.
Correct, so we're going to see that there is potential of the Beis Yisrael. There is a potential heter of Beis Yisrael, which might be based on that might be part of the reason for the potential heter of Beis Yisrael, which we're not really going to end up holding of, but there are Rishonim that do work with the heter of Beis Yisrael that the Isser wouldn't apply. Lamaisa, we don't pass in that way, but there are Rishonim that hold that way. We're not going to take it la halacha, but it may be a sniff heter in certain scenarios.
The whole typhus thing falls away.
Correct. No, exactly. That's one of the reasons. Lemaisa, as I pointed out, there's no Rishonim that, this is what I heard, I didn't go through them all, but I heard that there's no Rishonim that only use that. So if that's why, Beis Yisrael, at the end of the day, we're going to use it as a sniff heter, but we wouldn't use it as a heter in its own right. Okay.
Is Pas Akum going to be super makel? Because if you're buying a government-made bread, which is kosher, there's no chasnus over there.
So, okay, we're going to get into, you're already alluding to the heter of Moshe, we're going to get to that. And we know already from the Gemara there's a heter of Pas Palter, which we have to discuss. I mean, we're not really for today because it's really Bishul Akum as opposed to Pas Akum, but there are more heterim certainly by Pas Akum than there are by Bishul Akum. Well, actually, it's a little bit different type of heterim. The heterim of Pas Akum or Pas Akum doesn't apply in this and that scenario. Perhaps in a commercial situation, there's going to be scenarios where it won't apply, whereas Bishul Akum, there are going to be certain scenarios that this isn't Bishul Akum. But once it is Bishul Akum, then it will apply everywhere. I hope that was clear.
The chasana thing doesn't apply if you go buy anything that's not.
So we're gonna get. There's gonna be a geschmack heter from Moshe Feinstein.
Salmon or whatever.
Yeah, well, we're getting there. We're getting there. Yeah.
So then there's no chasana. You go to the supermarket.
Yeah.
Pick up what you want.
Okay. But we're going to see there's tremendous differences between the way that the Eretz Yisrael kashrus the top Eretz Yisrael kashrus organizations treat Bishul Akum and the heterim that they're willing to give versus the heterim that the chutznik, the American, the international organizations are willing to rely upon. Now, some might mistakenly think it's just because Eretz Yisrael, they're machmer, and the chutzlars, they're just a bunch of mekilim. But really, you got to understand the shasat chak is totally different. Within Eretz Yisrael, you're never more than a 5-minute drive away from somebody who wears a yarmulke, somebody who keeps Shabbos. You're never more than a 5-minute drive. You get somebody there to take care of the Bishul Akum issue. Whereas when you're dealing with factories, you might have a factory in Idaho, or maybe even a factory in some small village in China, and just getting somebody to take care of the Bishul Akum is pretty much not even an option. So therefore, the international organizations are going to have to get much more creative and much more kuladik in order to create kosher food, whereas the Eretz Yisrael type organizations don't have to come to that. Now, it still is a little scary. Rosh Shlomo Zalman suggests that perhaps the reason why there's so much intermarriage in Chutz La'aretz is because they rely on so many kullahs in Bishul Akum. And as we see from all the Rishonim, that the reason for Bishul Akum is Mishum Chastanis, so because of those kullahs, maybe that's why there's so much intermarriage. So that is a scary thought. So even though there is a Shasat Chak, and therefore there seemingly is halachic reason to be mekel, Rosh Shlomo Zalman has definitely sent a scary message. Okay, so how do we judge what is considered Oila al Shulchan Malachim? So the Aruch HaShulchan explains it's not dependent on Shas Gezerah. Sometimes we see when a Gezerah is made, we have to view the facts at the time of the Gezerah. But over here, this is part of the Gezerah. It's what is going to be nowadays, now a place, so to speak. What is in the place where you are in the year 2023, going to be 2024 soon, whatever. What is considered eaten raw now? And it's not based on your specific weird eating habits, but it's based upon the klal, what's considered normal in the klal, in the place where you are. There are going to be times where it's going to be complicated to define. For example, the chutznik matzav of Yerushalayim, is that part of general Eretz Yisrael, or is that its own matzav? These are not simple questions to answer. Okay. Now, there are many examples of things changing. The Aruch HaShulchan and the Chacham Sadim, for example, they both discuss about carrots being a problem of Bishul Akum. Nowadays, the Metzius has changed. We eat carrots raw. It's perfectly normal nowadays to eat carrots raw, and therefore there's no Bishul Akum on carrots. But it's clear, Bisman the Chacham Sadim, there was Bishul Akum in carrots. So we see things could definitely change. Now, the eating of the item, it needs to be normal, not something that some weirdos do. The example of the Shulchan Aruch, one of the examples, is that eggs. Yes, you could eat eggs raw. Yes, it might be, I don't care if your uncle the Chazan eats eggs raw, or your cousin the bodybuilder, if they eat eggs raw. I remember seeing these guys in Imrabina, chugging down eggs. But that doesn't make a difference. That's still Shasat Chak. That's still not normal. Even though we know people that do it, That's still not considered normal. Most people would not do it, and therefore, if the guy goes and cooks the eggs, that's asur mishum bishul akum. And that seems to be the mitzias. And I don't think that's changed. Now, what about some...
If you would go with that cooler, I mean, if it wasn't that, then meat and fish would fall away also.
So we're getting to fish. We'll see. Fish might be more to talk about. There might be...
Tartar is also, I mean, it's...
Right.
it's
As of show of hands, who here has ever eaten raw meat? Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
More hands than I thought. Okay. I was not expecting that many hands.
That carpaccio stuff?
Yeah.
Tartar-
Oh, man. All right. Fine. This might be different than I expected. I was not expecting, and I was expecting maybe one hand. Okay. I got like half the hands here went up when I just asked that. Okay.
But it's the meat,
maybe.
the meat of meat.
Is it a meat? Is it?
For sure.
No, it's most of the meat is. I'm asking the people. Would most of the people eat raw meat? What percentage of the people? I don't need. By the way, most. I want like 25, 30%. Is it weird? Is that weird?
It's not weird.
Not weird.
No, it's not weird.
Okay. That could change it.
It's still not the right.
So we'll see. When I start discussing fish.
But what you can say is that most times you eat it cooked.
No, that's not that. I'm fine already. If most people would eat it raw, then I'm fine already. We'll have to get to it. We're going to get to that in a second. When I discuss fish, we're going to discuss the meat. I am a little bit surprised by this mitzias. It wasn't what I was expecting. But, okay, cool. A cultured item. Okay.
Like raw eggs and like mayonnaise and stuff.
So very good question. It is normal to have raw eggs and mayonnaise and raw eggs in ice cream. That will not help because you're not eating raw eggs. You're eating mayonnaise and ice cream. Now let's get a little bit fun. Well, I'll get back to there in a second.
You think it's bottled to the...
It's bottled to the shame ice cream and shame mayonnaise.
So maybe it's bottled to
Yeah, I'm getting there. You got it. You're on the track. Now I just want to discuss for a second milk. Right? Milk is pasteurized. What is pasteurized? It's a quick cooking of the milk. So all the milk that we have around is pasteurized. So are we allowed to have that milk? And apparently even in Israel they're not makbid that a yid does the pasteurizing. And definitely in Chutz La'aretz, definitely if you have Chol Stam, but even in the Chol Yisrael places are makbid on pasteurizing.
Bishul, it's common and it gets too...
When it comes to Yain Nesach, we're going to call it Bishul.
No. The Yain Nesach gets to a much higher...
Yeah, you think it get?
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
I don't know. I didn't look into the Metzias.
There is a Metzias of Ma'alot.
Yeah, I didn't look into the Metzias. I was understanding that it's only going to work. Huh?
Bishul's not hot to get to Bishul.
It's not so hot.
So there's definitely pressure.
I'm sure it's getting to Yatz Lettuce Boy.
The milk doesn't get to you. If it gets to you, it's a lettuce boy that you're going to get this like
Stay in your lane.
Okay, maybe. So milk is drinking raw. What's your name? Yosef says milk is drinking raw, and the truth is, my father-in-law grew up drinking raw milk because my wife's grandparents, super healthy people. I don't know how that works. Nutrients are better than the potential bacteria. I don't know exactly, but they drink raw milk, and therefore it's drinking raw. But it's definitely not common to drink raw. It's not. I never drink raw milk. Right? Now all of a sudden, not everybody's drinking raw milk. Yeah. None of you drink it once. I'm not asking if you drink it once. I'm asking if that's something you drink. You don't have access. Okay. So Lamaisa, I went and what are the svaras? The svaras that they make with milk is the point of the cooking is to destroy the bacteria. And since the focus is not to create a positive, better milk, but it's rather to destroy the bacteria, therefore it's okay. There are other heterim svaras as well. It's not clear if Bishul Akum applies to drinks, and it's also not clear if milk is oila shulchan malachim. The Maisa, I asked Grandma Marilyn if there's a big difference in the taste of milk between the raw milk and she says the taste is totally different. It's a big difference. So once I heard that the taste is different, I kind of didn't like the svara so much anymore. It's just about killing bacteria. If it's creating a totally different taste, then it's doing more than that.
It's worse, yeah.
Maybe it's going worse, but definitely people who are used to having the milk that's cooked, if you put into their coffee this raw milk or into their bowl of cereal, they're going to be like, what's going on here? So therefore, it's not so pashut. But the ma'isa, we're going to be makel. Rav Yashiv is Mekel, Rav Vosner is Mekel, Rav Shem Zalman is Mekel, Bezdin Gadol, and we'll be Mekel, but Tzarchin on that one side of the heter. Okay. Now, Lamaisa, the Mishnah Brura, in Siman Reish Gimel, Sif Yud Aleph, quotes the Magen Avram. They're discussing Hilchas Brachas, and it says Zengabol, which is ginger, I think. So Zengabol, if the guy cooks it in honey, it's not a problem. It's not a Bishul Akum. Why? Because you could eat it raw with a little sugar. And since you could eat it raw with sugar, therefore it's eaten raw. And just because the guy is going to cook it with honey, that's not a problem of Bishul Akum. Now it seems to be that you would never eat Zengabol raw without sugar. You would only eat Zengabol with sugar, but that's considered eaten raw. Okay. Now, we already answered the question, but why is Zengabol considered eaten raw when it needs sugar, whereas the eggs are not considered eaten raw when they get mixed with the mayonnaise and ice cream?
Sorry,
It's still ginger.
side question. How much is the lettuce worth?
So that's a very debated question. Probably for 100 and we're going to get to sell this. All right, we're talking from 160 already. We're going to start being machir.
Okay, so pasteurization of milk is 145.
145.
There's definitely shitas who say that
There are shitas.
like that, wow.
But that's already much more makel. It's another tzad to be makel.
In Eretz Yisrael, it's slightly lower.
Interesting.
Probably for their
That could be. Yeah.
Hey, come on, they do that in Israel, they don't care about it.
Maybe. So Lemaisa, that's going to be the difference between the eggs and the ice cream. You're eating eggs and ice cream, whereas by the Zengabol, you're eating Zengabol. So Zengabol is considered eaten raw, whereas eggs are not considered eaten raw. Now, I was once listening to a shiur from 1993, Zev Smith, and Rav Zev Smith was saying in 1993, he was talking about the classic example of something that's not eaten raw in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Gemara already, is fish. Fish is not eaten raw. And he said that he was once giving a shiur, and somebody told him that there are these guys in work, these Chinese, Japanese guys that eat some sort of raw fish sandwich. I don't know if I believe it even, but definitely some Meshugana from China or Japan or whatever is going to have no effect in the halacha. 30 years later, Rabbi said, we're the Meshuganas. So sushi is definitely become normal to eat. And, even 10 years ago, you hear what some of the poskim say, 15 years ago, whatever. 10 years ago, it was completely normal in America to have sushi. But in Eretz Yisrael, it might have been normal in Rechavia. It might have been normal in Ramat Eshkol 10 years ago. But it still wasn't common practice in Eretz Yisrael. Nowadays, sushi is common practice in Eretz Yisrael. Maybe not everybody could afford it.
It's not royal achila.
What? We gotta bring me some sushi. I'll show you some achila. So nowadays it's all over the place. And even in Eretz Yisrael, it's completely normal to eat sushi. It happens to be that not everybody could afford sushi, but when they go to their wealthy cousin Simcha, if they eat fish, they'll eat sushi. So therefore, are we going to say now that fish is able to be eaten be cooked by a guy? I'm sorry. Can we say that salmon or tuna could be cooked by a guy because it's right to eat raw? So the answer with this so far is probably not. It probably won't help. Because just like by the eggs where I said you're eating mayonnaise and you're eating ice cream, over here you're not eating raw fish. I know where you're going, Ellie. We're getting there. You're not eating raw fish. You're eating sushi. So if you're eating sushi, then l'chorah that doesn't help. I agree it's not as far as the mayonnaise and ice cream where it's completely, you don't even see it. Because over here you still see the sushi. But the ikar of what you're eating is
the soy sauce.
There's around the soy sauce there. The bracha is going to be mezainis on what you're eating. It's sushi, which is mezainis. It's not you're just eating raw fish. So therefore, even at, the l'chayr doesn't help you. It's not like the zengabol where you're eating ginger with a little something. Over here, you're eating a different item. You're eating sushi. Now, nowadays in America, it's become much, much more normal to eat raw fish. What was it called? Somebody said the name of it? Shoshimi. That's with the fish on the rice in the bottom, or just plain raw fish?
They do both.
Okay, so now sometimes they have a little rice in the bottom, and sometimes they have plain raw fish. I think in America this has become normal. I know over Sukkot's time me, my son, my father-in-law, and my brother-in-law, we went fishing off the coast of Long Beach, California, to catch some sushi. 300 pounds of tuna. 300 pounds of tuna later, the captain was cutting up the fish on the shore. We were all eating raw tuna like that, and that was normal. And went to my wife's grandparents' house. They were cutting up the fish. Everybody was eating a little lemon on, a little sauce, and everybody's eating the raw tuna. And it seems, I ate it myself, and it seems to be in America, this is already normal. And therefore, I think I'm willing to say that in America, that tuna and salmon will not have a problem of Bishul Akum, because it is normal to eat raw. It doesn't mean that necessarily more than 50% of people are doing it, but it's not weird. It's already normal. I think in Eretz Yisrael, this part has not swam across the ocean yet. You might have your individuals that do it, but it's still in general society in Eretz Yisrael, we're not there yet. Regular sushi has swam across the ocean. It's made it to Europe. It's made it to Eretz Yisrael. Probably made it to South Africa and Australia, I'm sure. But Lamaisa, I think the sushi swam across the ocean already, but the raw salmon, I don't think is here yet. So l'chayra, yeah?
There's a difference between having a big slab of raw salmon. I don't think people are going to be eating that. People are going to be having a
thin slice
salmon. They're having a little teeny slice as like an appetizer. Mm-hmm. So
what's the difference?
So once that food is eaten, we don't start differentiating between thicknesses, and we don't start differentiating between even quality. Meaning, I was just going to say in a second, I don't think this is you don't only have the heter by, quote, sushi grade salmon and sushi grade tuna. Once we're going to say that salmon in America for now, probably here in a couple of years it will get here. It's probably on its way through the ocean right now. So that over there we're going to say any tuna and any salmon you'll be allowed to cook, because we're there yet. And by the way, one point that I want to make on the sugya, which is very important, especially the sushi sugya, I don't care what pasuk you show me, a tshuva from more than 5 years ago. It's unapplicable. And especially if it was the Eretz Yisrael pasuk. It's not saying because, they don't know. No, what they were saying was correct. A psak from Rav Yashiv about whether he says sushi makes a difference is not applicable, because that was different mitzias. And it's not that I'm arguing with Rav Yashiv. It's just a different mitzias. Even with this shayla, I don't think 5 years ago in America this was normal. But now it is normal. So it's a really bad. I don't even care. You show me Rav Belsky actually didn't hold of the svara, which is fine. Rav Belsky was nifter 10 years ago. Nowadays, I don't know, 7 years ago, whatever it was. But nowadays, it is going to apply, or 5 years ago, whatever it is. Now, this will apply to all types of sushi, even frozen sushi, frozen salmon, which you would never use for sushi, maybe. It would still have this heter, I believe. Now, fine. Now,
do we say controversial with regard to this type of stuff?
No. When it's clear, the Shulchan Aruch is mefurish that, and I'll even take it a step further. Shulchan Aruch is mefurish that if a guy does kivush, the guy makes your herring, you're allowed to eat it. We can have I'm saying if he's making your herring, I'm talking about one of those guys who speak Yiddish. You know what I'm saying? So if one of those guys who speak Yiddish make your herring, mutter gomer. And I'll tell you another kiddush.
That's obviously more than 10 years old.
That what?
Was it? What did the person say 20 years ago, 100 years ago about the guy making herring?
No, we don't say kivush k'mevushal. I'm saying that's raw herring. If the guy takes raw herring and cooks it, that's a problem. If the guy does kivush and turns your raw herring into salted herring, like we normally eat it, that's fine. The act of salting does not create Bishul Akum. But I'll take you another case, which is a step further. If that guy goes and takes your salted herring and decides to cook it, it's still mutter. If he would have cooked the raw herring, it would be a problem. That would be Bishul Akum. But he's allowed to salt it. That doesn't create Bishul Akum. And now it's eaten in that state. Once it's eaten in that state where it's salted, now he goes and cooks it, it's still fine.
Well, ein bishul acha bishul.
No, it's not any Bishul. It's eaten raw then. Yeah? So that's actually a very geshmaka thing. Now what does it mean? Let's get for a minute to Oila al Shulchan Malachim. Bishul Akum only applies to something which is Oila al Shulchan Malachim. So what does that mean? So the Rambam holds that it means something which is you're going to invite somebody over for. He explains Oila al Shulchan Malachim as being something chashuv that you would invite, serve it to a guest. You would invite somebody over, come, let's have a fill in the blank. That is Oila al Shulchan Malachim. The Arizal says it doesn't mean Malachim mamish, even sarim. Even something that chashuv people, sarim, you would serve to, that is enough to be considered Oila al Shulchan Malachim. The Chida and the Isser v'Heter say what you would serve to important people. Anything that you would serve to important people, that is considered Oila al Shulchan Malachim. They say in the name of the Chazon Ish, though this is debated, because different people have different reports whether he did say it or he didn't say it, that anything that would be eaten by the king, by the Malachim, that would be considered Oila al Shulchan Malachim. That's a big chumrah. And most do not take that l'maisa. L'maisa, Rav Vosner is machmir for this idea of the Chazon Ish, that anything that would have been eaten by a king is Oila Shulchan Malachim, but pretty much nobody else is makbid for it. So what do the big kashrus organizations consider Oila Shulchan Malachim? So the Star K, they call the White House, and they ask them what would be served at a state's dinner at the White House. I'm not positive exactly what a state's dinner is, but I know it must be something chashuv. And they call them and ask, would this type of food be served? If they say it wouldn't be served, they say it's not Oila al Shulchan Malachim. The OU calls up the fancy caterers in New York and says, would it be served at a New York chasana? A New York fancy chasana. Will it be served at a New York wedding? If it won't be served at the New York wedding, it is an Oila al Shulchan Malachim. Now, many of the Rabbanim, yeah?
And the London business.
I'm sure they figure out what the queen's up to, but I don't know.
No, because I mean.
Or the queen's dead, but the king.
No, this what's the new guy? The new king.
Charles.
Charles eats cornflakes and milk every morning.
Right. So Lefi, if that's the case, Lefi the Chazon Ish, that would be a problem. But he eats it for breakfast. According to everybody else's gather, I don't think it's about breakfast. It's about a chashuv meal. He doesn't have a chashuv meal and invites everybody over for cornflakes. Lefi the Chazon Ish, he eats cornflakes, would be a problem. But Lefi, the way that everybody else is megader it has to be to some form of shulchan malachim, as I think you said last week. It has to be a chashuv meal. So we're not going to be real. The Chazon Ish might be makbir for those cornflakes, but the rest of us wouldn't be, because it's not shulchan malachim. It has some form of connotation of suda, something fancy. But I agree there's what to debate about this. It's not clear-cut. And because it's not clear-cut, that's one of the reasons that we see a large variation between the poskim. Now, a lot of people question the OU and the Star K, and they want to know why, Mechatesi, New York wedding, White House States dinner, you're arguing the Rambam. The Rambam was much more machmir than you. He said, well, you would invite a friend over, invite a guest over. The level is much lower to invite a guest or a friend over than to state's dinner and New York chasana. But I don't think it's such a big taina against the OU and the Star K, because l'maisa, the mechaber says Oila shulchan malachim l'lafetz b'es the pas. The mechaber knows how to quote the Rambam when he wants to, and he didn't. So I don't think it's such a taina against the OU and Star K that you're being makel against the Rambam, because the mechaber knows how to bring the Rambam l'halacha, and he decided not to. So the Rambam is not the halacha. Now one could though debate and say that mechit, but how did they know to draw the line there? That is still somewhat of a kasha, but the fact that it's being makel against the Rambam, I'm not so bothered. Now, but one thing is, I think the OU, for example, has gone too far with this. Oh, by the way, before I start bashing anything, the OU, one thing about them, which you're not going to find in any of the Eretz Yisrael kashrus organizations, is that they're completely transparent. They tell you exactly what they paskin about everything and why they do it. And if you have a question, I did this last week, I emailed them and they sent me an answer that day. They are and what they say they do, they do. So they have some, I think, kullahs that have gone too far, but I gotta give them the praise that I actually was able to handle, look at their kullahs and argue with them or agree with them. Whereas all these other, all the Eretz Yisrael kashrus organizations, the conversation doesn't start because nobody knows what they're makel and what they're machmer on because they'll never tell you. So, whatever. But I thank them for letting us know, but I have tainas on them. Like, for example, I picked out 2 examples. They say that by pancakes or French toast, they're not oila al shulchan malachim. Now, why not? Because they're not served at a New York chasana. Pancakes aren't served at a New York chasana because they're milchiks. Pancakes, you go to a fancy bris, a fancy brunch, and they're going to serve pancakes and French toast. It's a chashuva type of food. It's just it happens to be milchiks, and New York chasanas are fleishiks. If you want to use New York chasana as a simon, beseder, okay, I can handle it. But it's not a gzeres hakasiv. It's not like, wait a second, it's not a New York chasana, and therefore it's not oila shulchan malachim. And the chayra, I would think pancakes and French toast are a chashuva thing. You would find it at a chashuva milchik meal, and therefore the chayra, it should be oila shulchan malachim.
But like we were saying before, oila shulchan malachim connotes a chashuva meal, a chashuva suda, not like a brunch or a breakfast.
Automatically turns to flesh.
Yeah.
No, what if you had a chashuva early meal? If you had a chashuva early... If you had a meal that was chashuv earlier in the day.
When Chazal referred to Oila Shulchan, we're talking about I don't know, am I wrong? Assuming a chashuv at night meal. No,
So now if we're gonna say a new klal.
Otherwise you flick into the Rambam.
Huh?
Otherwise you flick over to the Rambam.
No, but the idea is
Okay, fine, it's nice.
a chashuv meal.
breakfast on a chashuv meal. You know what I'm saying?
Huh?
A breakfast isn't a...
It could be. We have sis mitzvahs that are milchik meal.
So when Mechaber is talking about...
And we don't see a din anywhere from any earlier opinion. There's no such thing as oila shulchan malachim by milchiks. Nobody ever said that. So now we're coming and it wasn't said anywhere. There's no such thing as oila shulchan malachim by milchiks. And I don't think this changed. It used to be they had chashuv and milchik meals, and now they don't anymore. It's possible that it changed. I don't think that. I'm saying none of the achronim bring down. None of the achronim bring down that milchiks are an oila shulchan malachim.
Well, they're cheeses.
Huh?
That's it. Then you're down to cheeses. They're not pancakes.
Yeah, so I'm saying cheeses we never said aren't oila shulchan malachim.
He's saying the thing with pancakes is not because it's milchik. It's just that even if you have a chashuv meal, you're not going to have pancakes.
By the way, Liyitzor, there wasn't a milchik issue. You wouldn't be able to see it at a smorgasbord in New York Hasana. I think you could see it at a smorgasbord in New York Hasana if it wasn't for the milchik things. I mean, they might. And then the fancy brissim. Okay. You have to go to New York. Another example, once we're having our fun over here. French fries. Rebelsky, the OU, say that French fries aren't oila al shulchan malachim. Now, I also take some issue with this. I can go to a fancy steakhouse and get a fancy steak with on the side some fancy, some of those thick French fries, steak fries with the gravy on top from the meat. Okay, everybody getting hungry? Yeah? You tell me that's not oila al shulchan malachim?
Back to the English royal family.
I don't know about the English royal family. Maybe they don't. But you go to a fancy steakhouse in New York, and you'll be able. It's one of the things one of the main options that you get on the side of your steak is this big. So you're gonna tell me that's not oila al shulchan malachim? I find it hard to believe. And to start differentiating between these French fries, yeah, those French fries, no, I think is
because you're eating them with your fingers and your potato and ketchup. It's not
maybe. So we already see that we're not going to differentiate.
It's not fine dining and French fries.
Huh?
It's not served on crystal and
I'm saying you will see at a New York Manhattan steakhouse, which would cost $100 a plate. You'll see.
We're back to the They
The chasana, you'll find in chasana.
French fries, maybe
The big, thick steak fries. Yeah. No, so Rebelski Tavka defends against that. And he says, don't tell me kids' table, because that's Dafka araya for me, that they're only going to serve it to the kids. But I think they'll serve those thick. Okay, fine. As we see, there's room for fun over here. Okay. Now, one of the lashon of the Gemara is the lafes bayas pas. It has to be oila shulchan lachem lafes bayas pas, which sounds usually to mean to be eaten with bread. So the Maritats actually says that seemingly it seems like he's arguing on the Shulchan Aruch, by the way, because the Shulchan Aruch has examples which aren't things which are eaten with bread. Not that I knew what all those examples meant, but apparently not all those things are eaten with bread. So it's only things that are eaten with bread. So therefore, your salmon, which you never eat salmon with bread, therefore Bishul Akum would not apply. That would be the Maritats. The Meister of Henkin paskin this way. We're talking about, America, 1920s, 1930s, when Zaidi was young, and in that world, Lower East Side. So that's how Rav Henkin paskin. But Lamaisa, nobody else took this on la halacha, because Lamaisa, seemingly, it's against the Shulchan Aruch. Now, however, something which is just a snack, then we would say that there is no issue of Bishul Akum, meaning even if it was a, quote, chush of a snack, but if it's not the type of thing that you would serve as a mealtime food.
Okay, so then we're back to our French fries.
I have with my steak. So if it's something that's not a mealtime food, therefore it would not be an issue of Bishul Akum. So let's say, for example, I get an interesting question, Doritos. So Doritos, we have Dorito salad. Americans, please explain to the non-Americans what Dorito salad is. Right, a very common thing for, Doritos and salad. So that doesn't count because the Doritos are bottled to the salad. The main thing is the salad. Doritos are just a tavlin. Avada.
Yeah, you take a bunch of different flavored Doritos and you make it into a curious stuff.
Fine.
So like salami inside with Doritos.
Yeah, so whatever. But that doesn't count because that's all bottled to everything else.
It's not a Dorito salad. It's a lettuce
But they call it the Dorito
It's a
salad.
lettuce salad with some Doritos.
Correct. But for some reason it goes, I'll shame the Doritos. I didn't name it. But that's not going to make a difference.
If there weren't the Doritos, they wouldn't make this.
Okay, what about potato chips? Let's have some fun. Potato chips, right? So let's actually speak a little bit about what potatoes for a second. So the Chachmas Adam says potatoes are oila shulchan malachim. The Marsham says cooked potatoes are. There's 100 years later after the Chachmas Adam. The Marsham says that cooked potatoes are oila shulchan malachim. Baked potatoes are not oila shulchan malachim. Around the same time frame as the Marsham, there was the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan says potatoes are not oila shulchan malachim. It's peasant food. Potatoes are for poor people. That's not oila shulchan malachim. Now, it's not a kasha. They were in different parts of the world. So, therefore, they can have different anhagas. Now, Lamaisa, as the Shevet Levi says, which is pashut, nowadays, potatoes are considered part of a chashav meal, and therefore potatoes are oila al shulchan malachim. Now, the Shach, the Aruch HaShulchan, and the Isser V'Heter, they're discussing meat. They say karvayim, the korkovin, ubenei ma'am, different types of like innards of meat. They're low quality meat. I don't know what exactly they are. Kishka, whatever it is. I don't know what exactly they are all. But gizzards and kishka and whatever all this stuff is. We're talking about low quality meat. They say that is oila al shulchan malachim. Even though when it comes to the sugya of bittul, we don't say that they're a chaticha sharei l'schaved. We don't say that they're generally a piece of meat. We often say is too chashiv that it cannot be batal. But when it comes to these things, they are batal. They're not a chaticha sharei l'schaved. However, they still are oila al shulchan malachim. The question is why. So there is someone I want to explain because they hold meat is meat and all meat is meat and it's just meat and meat is fine. However, the Isser V'Heter, the reason that he explains, he says that those things, chatika sharei l'schaved not being batal, to be a chatika sharei l'schaved, you have to be a main dish. But these different types of cheap meat, they're not a main dish, but they're still a side dish. The Isser V'Heter. So therefore, that would not prove the idea of meat is meat, but it does show that a different way of looking at it. Now, what about potato chips? So we already see from the Marsham.
I've seen them serving at weddings, like Moab Yerushalayim. Yerushalmi and things like that. It's like a first dish.
Potatoes that get dipped into something?
Like the Milrav Yerushalmi. Like
Yeah.
meat.
What's Murav Yerushalmi?
That's all
Like
those
that's all the inner meats that gets together.
Oh, the inner, the kishka stuff you're talking about. Okay, fine.
And the biggest lie is about pas because it's served on a piece of
You're right.
bread.
Alafa.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to different weddings, I think. Okay. Fine, very good. So the Mesa.
The liver, when you get the liver, it's served
Yeah.
on like this crispy bread.
Yeah.
So that's what one of those is. One of those.
Yeah. Okay, fine. I'm fine with it. Now the Mesa, the Marsham said that not all potatoes are created equal. That cooked potatoes are a issue of Bishul Akum, but baked potatoes are not. This is Dr. Belsky, and I agree with him in Svara. He says that, regular potatoes, roasted potatoes, whatever it is an issue of Bishul Akum. Potato chips are not an issue of Bishul Akum because it's just a different type of situation. And potato chips are definitely a snack. They're not Oila al Shulchan Malachim. L'maisa, Ramosha Feinstein says that potato chips are an issue of Bishul Akum. There is Bishul, you need Bishul Yisrael by potato chips, as he wrote in a tshuva to his son, Rav Reuven Feinstein, who wasn't English. He lived in the same house as Rav Moshe. So in Chelik Ches, in Reish Ayin Daled, or Ayin Daled Reish, goes back to him. So Rav Moshe writes a tshuva to his son, who knew exactly what potato chips was, and he spells it out, potato chips, and in his heart. So he writes that needs Bishul Yisrael. And he says, L'maisa, if somebody doesn't, ein moicha, don't make a macha, because there's a different heter of factories, which I'm going to discuss a little bit later, but based on the potatoes, it needs Bishul Yisrael. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky also says.
Is that because he holds that potatoes are potatoes, or it is something that is really...
No. So I'll explain in a second. So, and Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky also says that it is Oila Shulchan Malachim. Now, I heard Rav Kalos explain Rav Moshe, because seemingly Rav Moshe is arguing in the Marsham. The Marsham said not all potatoes are created equal, and now Rav Moshe Feinstein and Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky are saying all potatoes are created equal. So the way that Rav Kalos explained, and I think it makes a lot of sense, is really Rav Moshe agrees to the Marsham. Not all potatoes are created equal. However, what is a potato chip? We know a baked potato is Oila al Shulchan Malachim. A sliced baked potato, thick slices, Oila al Shulchan Malachim. You fry them, potatoes, Oila al Shulchan Malachim. What is a potato chip? It's just a baked potato or a fried potato cut thinner. The Marsham said we could differentiate between different cooking processes. We could say cooking, yeah, baking, no. But when it's the same process, it's just one's thicker and one's thinner, that we're not going to differentiate, and therefore, as Dr. Moshe, as Dr. Rabbi Kamenetsky, potato chips need Bishul Yisrael.
But how are you going to reconcile that with the snack versus the food?
So if this was the only way that anybody ate potatoes, was that the only time you would eat potatoes was as a snack, then it would be fine. But over here, since the food, this same food with a thicker version of it, is eaten as a non-snack, therefore it's the whole entire concept of baked or fried potatoes is Oila al Shulchan Malachim. And Rav Vosner, he says it's a problem with potato chips, but he's working once again with the Chazon Ish of the King Eats potato chips, etc., which once again all the other poskim reject. Now, one thing that's interesting is many quote Rav Moshe as saying that this is svara of companies, and we're talking about great high-level people that quote Rav Moshe. We're talking about Rav Reuven Feinstein. We're talking about Rav Belsky. We're talking about Rav First from Chicago. We're talking about Rav Nata Greenblatt, who all quote Rav Moshe as saying this svara. Bishul Akum should not apply to things that are produced in a factory. Why? And because you're never going to meet that guy, and it's not. You don't know where it came from. You never see the guy that made it. Even if you wanted to find out where that guy that was made it, you'll never track it down. There's no shaykhs, no chances of you guys ever meeting. And furthermore, the style of cooking, it's not, regular cooking is in your home pot. If you would go to the restaurant where the guy would cook, that would still be a problem because the guy's just going to use a pot and a bigger pot. But it's the same type of thing. It's Heimish cooking, which is going to create kirva. But what some guy does on some conveyor belt in some factory, that type of style of cooking will not create any kirva. And therefore, this has no sheikhus to the bishul of the Gemara. And therefore, Bishul Akum would not apply by a factory. Now, the kasha in Ramosha is, we saw the Taz, who says that, for example, by somebody, this is going back to Pasakum, where we saw that somebody who has no children, the priest who has no children, Pasakum still applies. And it would go in this as well, because it's a loy plug. The Taz says explicitly, it's a loy plug. I don't care if you have kids or not. So over here, when I was Ramosha being matter, it's a loy plug, and it's Bishul Akum. But Ramosha knows about that Taz. Ramosha is saying a step further. The whole entire matzah is so different. This isn't the matzah of Bishul Akum, and Mamela, it's even outside of the loy plug. This is a very, very bold chiddush to say. There's other approaches. For example, Rav Yashiv says, wait a second. Is the guy who turned on the switch, is he a guy? Is he Akum? Yeah. Is the process that just happened Bishul? Yeah. So if there's a bishul that's done by an akum, it's called bishul akum. That's how Rav Yashiv would say. What type of narishkeit is this? And Moshe Sternbach says you can't rely on it. The Chazon Ish said you can't rely on these types of svaras. The Minchas Yitzchak says you could rely on it as a sniff laheter. But Lamaisa, I love the svar of Moshe because it's super logical. It makes so much sense. But some would argue that you have to be a Rishon to say a svar like this. Because at the end of the day, the pashtus is bishul, it's akum, and it should be bishul akum. One thing that I want to note is that Ramosha in the tshuva to Reuven, he didn't say that you could be samech on this. He said, ein limchois, you shouldn't make a macha against it because they have the svara. So it's a little bit, something's weird going on over here, because these four great poskim of America are all quoting Rav Moshe as saying you could rely on this heter, whereas what's actually written in the Igros Moshe is Chel Ches. So that's one of the things. It is Chel Ches, which you could argue Chel Ches Rav Moshe didn't put out himself. It was put out after he was nifter already by family members. It could be Rav Moshe never wanted the tshuva published because maybe that was to Rav Reuven. To his son, he was saying don't rely on it. But maybe he didn't want it to be. Maybe for the general public, he held you could rely on it. That's what I was thinking. We have a drop more. Are we out of time? You want to hear the glow bulb versus remote? What do you do if you have a factory which is far out and you can't get there? How are you going to go and take care of the Bishul Yisrael issue if you're not in Eretz Yisrael? You don't have a guy 5 minutes away. How are you going to get the stuff actually cooked? What could you do? So there's two eitzas by the two biggest kashrus organizations, and the geshmak of fun part is they both hold that what the other one does is bishul akum. So this is fun. So they have the eitzah of the star K. The eitzah of the star K is they insert something called a glow plug or a glow bulb into the oven of the guy. Something that we didn't discuss yet, or I guess we're not getting to today, is that all you need, at least for Ashkenazi, I should say, is to flip in a little twig. As long as the Ashkenazi guy flips in a little twig into the oven, that's enough to kasher the whole fire. Even though it's a teeny percentage of the overall cooking fuel, but that's enough to make the fire good for Bishul Yisrael. So they install into the oven of the factory this incandescent light bulb thing that provides heat in the oven. And therefore they view that as if it is lit. There's a little bit of fire there. They started the fire. And since they started the fire, there's a little bit of the Jewish fire there. That never goes out. That even when they shut the oven off, that stays on. And therefore, since the Jew threw in that kissing, that little twig of a glow plug, therefore they're taking part in the Bishul, and it's all Bishul Yisrael. That's what the Star K does. The OU says, no, you can't do that, as I discussed with a OU member last week, that the tain of the OU is that it's not nicker, the Jewish involvement. A Jew goes and and installs the plug 2 years ago and hasn't been done any of the bishul since, it's not nicker the Jewish involvement, and since it's not nicker, it would be Bishul Akum. The question on that is, as I asked, let's say a Jew would go and start the fire or flip in a twig, right? And that fire, I'm not even talking about a pilot light, I'm talking about mamish the fire, would stay lit for 2 or 3 years. Would you call that Bishul Yisrael? And the answer is yes. It's Mefresh Pashat Adin. It's Mefresh, that's Bishul Yisrael. Now, but it's not Nicker. So apparently it doesn't need to be Nicker. You don't have to see the whole history. As is Mefresh in the Shulchan Aruch, you got multiple runs, even though that twig's fuel is long burnt out. So the chayre, it's good. The other taina was that when it gets restarted, we see the twig as the twig is to take the existing fire and build upon the existing fire. Over here, since the glow plug was lit before they started the fire, it's not going on the additional fire. That was there first, and therefore it's not doima to the twig of the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch. But I think that taina is pretty shvach as well. What's more chashiv, the initial fire or what gets added on to the fire? I think in Svara, the one who's maskil, the start of the fire is much more chashiv than what gets thrown on as well. And therefore, I would agree with the Star K that the glow plug is ganz fine. Now, by the way, I just want to point out, like the Aruch Shulchan and others say that the twig is b'diavad.
I mean, that's already Baba Kama,
That what?
You're throwing an aish with the thing.
Yeah, so as long as there's a little involvement, that's all you need for the gezerah not to apply. That's how they made the gezerah. They made the gezerah that it can't be completely Goyish involvement. Over here, there's Jewish involvement. Now, there's heat. There is actual heat coming from the Jew. And in fact, I'll say that the glow plug is better than the twig, because the twig gets burnt out, and then it's not actually providing any heat. This glow plug, even though it's such a small percentage of the overall heat, but it continues to, over the course of the years, it is giving a little heat. And it never gets used up. So in fact, it might even be better than the twig. So I think it's fine. Then there's the OU Mahalach. What the OU does is, they have their factory in Idaho or China or whatever. And what they do is, they have somebody in the OU office in Manhattan who presses a button. And by pressing that button, he turns on the oven of the factory in China. And therefore, it's Bishul Yisrael. He turns it on. Now, the Star Case says to the OU, that you can't do that. There's what's the kesher, what's the sheikhs between the guy in the office in New York and the factory in China? That's no kesher. That's not Bishul Yisrael. I don't like that taina either. I think it should. Listen, if I go to my smart home and I say, Alexa, turn on the heat, and the heat gets turned on, is there any shayla in the world from Oiver Issa Deresa? No shayla. It is pashut as day. I am over Issa Deresa for telling Alexa on Shabbos to turn on the heat. Because that is the switch. That is the way to do it. And if I did it from my phone, from down the block, you're going to tell me I'm not over? Of course I'm over. That's a switch. That's a way of doing it. Who cares whether the guy is 5 feet away or on the other side of the world? He's doing it. It's his maisa. And if it's his maisa, he did it, and therefore it's Bishul Yisrael. But the Starkey doesn't accept this. But I think both they both want each other. I would eat both of them. I think they're both good tainas. Politics.
Are you holding by this Alexa thing?
Yeah, sure. They have the guy in Manhattan turns on the thing.
Oh, on Shabbos.
Oh, I think everybody. I don't think there's anything to argue. That is the Maisa. You did the Maisa. It's not a grumma. You did the action. That's the switch. Who cares if you probably had when they invented light switches, you had somebody saying, "Are you over?" Because you turned on the light switch. You didn't make the light bulb, turn on. But now we understand when you flip up the light switch, that makes the incandescent bulb light up.
Whoa, with Alexa, man.
Even if you use Siri, you might be Jewish.
First of all, then you're going to say that Dibur is Maisa.
In this case, it is.
And then you have to say, especially according to the early, the Achronim, and they say that a whole binyan and eish. So where's the eish and where's the binyan and where's all these things?
Okay, well, no, I specifically chose the example of heat. I specifically chose the example of heat, which doesn't get involved in the question of whether electricity is deraisa or derabbanan. Because if you turn on the heater, it's going to get something to get hot, and it's always going to be. It's always going to.
If you turn.
Yeah, there's many ways to turn on. I think it's pashut. I don't even have a shayla about it. That's the switch. And if you go to a place where you know your motion sensor opens the door. I'm not talking about my mistake where you went and doesn't need it. I want to get into this door. And I'm walking and that's how you open this door. That's the Shura Isser. That's how you open the door. I'm not talking about mistakes. I'm not talking about Davar Shem Miskavins. My kavana is to open this door. The way that it works is when I walk to it, I know the sensor is going to open it, and that's what I'm doing. For sure it's Asser. That's the way to open the door, even though I didn't touch anything. For sure. That's the switch. Just like when I turn on the switch, that turns on the incandescent light bulb. For sure. I don't know if we're out of time. I have one more point about coffee.
So what's the staircase time then according to you?
So they want to say that since you're removed from you're in a different location, therefore there's no hisyachsness to you. It's not connected. I think it's a shvaka
I would
taina.
say turning on the heat on Shabbos with Alexa is a foul.
I don't think they would. I agree with you. I agree. It's hard for me to defend who I'm arguing with. I'm not sure what they. Last week I had the schus of arguing with a OU member, but last week I did not have the schus of finding a Star K member. Next week. Okay, and just one thing to finish off with is coffee, which is a big shayla. Could you eat coffee raw? No. Is coffee oila al shulchan malachim? Is it a chashuv of food? It's definitely chashuv. Now, what if a guy makes a coffee in the airplane, in Starbucks, etc.? Could you drink that coffee? Don't worry, I'm not taking it away. The nice of the minig is to be makel. The minig is that we do drink coffee that is made by the guy. The question is why. So there's a whole group of sniffim lahater that we're going to put together. Number one, it's a drink, and some say Bishul Akum does not apply to drinks. So that's off the bat one. Now, number two, it's only something that's lafis by as a pas. Is coffee lafis by as a pas? So definitely according to the Marie Tatz's Mahalach, with Rav Henkin goes, which we actually don't pass him like, that's something that you eat with the bread. You usually don't eat with the bread. Maybe some people dip some stuff into their coffee, but it's definitely not. Most people aren't eating coffee with bread. Now, otherwise, I'm not sure. L'maisa, somebody would drink a coffee during their fancy breakfast, brisk breakfast, but 95% of the time that I think people drink coffee, it's usually not in the middle of the meal. So there may be some heter, but I agree it's not clear that it's not a meal type food. But then again, a lot of times people have it for dessert, so it's not so pashut. Number three, they say it's bottled to the water, and the water is drunk raw. That's how you make a shahakal on coffee, because the coffee is bottled to the water, and therefore the water is drinking raw. Now, it's coffee, it's not water though. The next heter is that it sounds similar, but it's different, that coffee is just plitas tam. Flavored water. It's plitas tam, meaning you don't actually end up eating. This is only true, the svara is only true by brewed coffee. The svara is not true by instant coffee. That you're not actually having any of the coffee. All you have is water that got flavored by the coffee. But you don't actually end up eating any of the coffee. And therefore, the bishul that happens in the coffee has nothing to do with the water that you're drinking. Now, I can argue in the last two things. L'maisa, we call it coffee. We don't call it water with coffee flavor. We call it coffee. That's the whole kashivas of it. Now, when I gave a shiur on Chamar Medina, I endorsed the practice of using coffee as Chamar Medina. Now, there are some poskim that argue, some Rabbanim, whatever, who say that you can't use coffee as Chamar Medina because it's just flavored water. Now, I found a beautiful raya against them, and I was very excited that I found this. There's a Tosfos on Avodah Zarah Lamed Aleph from Beis that says that, second answer of Tosfos, whatever it's getting involved in, that by beer, the bracha is shahakal, because the main thing that you're having is water. It's just water. The grain is bottled to the water, and therefore it's shahakal. And there's no bishul akum on beer because It's water. Now, so we're calling it water, and therefore it's not Bishul Akum on the beer. Now, what's the example of the Gemara of Chmar Medina? The example of the Gemara of Chmar Medina is beer. So you could see from Tosfos, it's clear that Tosfos held that even though beer, it does qualify as Chmar Medina, and it's not considered water in regards to Chmar Medina, but in regards to Bishul Akum, it is considered water, and it's not an issue of being mevashel the grain.
It's alcoholic though, and that makes it more choshev for
Yeah, but then you would.
No, but in Economy, if we viewed it as water, he's saying by Bishul Akum we call it water. But by Chmar Medina, we're not considering it water.
because it's got the alcoholic chelik sheba.
Maybe, but I'm saying, why is the alcohol a factor in Chmar Medina, but it's not a effect Bishul?
You make a ha'etz on your coffee.
No, we're saying that it is, in terms of brachas, it is bottled to the water, and the water is what it's going to define the bracha, but that doesn't mean that it totally loses its chashivas. Meaning that doesn't mean, sorry, I said that the wrong way. That doesn't make it that Chmar Medina. Meaning it's not a stira to say it is Chmar Medina, even though in brachas and Bishul Akum it's water. That's all I'm proving. What the pshat in that is, I don't know. We could debate and we come up with pshatim. I'm not looking right now to come up with the pshat. I'm just proving that Tosfos held that by beer, even though when it came to Chmar Medina, it wasn't considered just water, it was considered Chmar Medina, but by Bishul Akum and brachas, it's considered water, and that's not a stira. Why it's not a stira, you need to come up with a pshat. But once we see that in beer, I think it's a raya brura, in my opinion, that we could say it as well, and l'chayr we could say it as well in coffee. Just the next one's instant coffee. There might not be oil shulchan malachim. That's what the debate.
You have to, to come up with some sort of Torah with it because it is liquid.
It's alcoholic maybe, that could be.
Yeah.
No, but alcoholic can still be a shako.
Say it. Why it's good for Chmar Medina is because the alcohol should burn. It's a real choshev.
Because it's a choshev drink. It's a thing. It's not a wine. It's the alcohol.
So meaning the vart is, just to play it back, I wasn't planning on getting further. It might be that it is considered water, but water maybe not be a problem with Chmar Medina. Meaning, it might be something that's ikar as water. It might be at the end of the day it's ikar as water, and therefore there's no Bishul Akum because it's ikar as water. And it might be that it's shahako because the ikar is water, but that doesn't disqualify it from being Chmar Medina.
Medically, it's not considered water.
I'm saying I don't consider either of them. I consider it a beer and coffee personally, but I will make shahakos. Okay, but I'm just proving that that's what Tosfos would hold. It's debatable whether instant coffee would be considered oila shulchan malachim. Because of the chashuv of the thing, you're not going to have instant coffee. However, I would say that the question is, do we consider coffee's coffee, or do we say it's a totally different category of things? I'm not sure myself how to consider it. Another point, possible heter, is it's usually made, instant coffee for sure is generally made with iroi. It's not made in the kli rishon. Generally you pour from the kli rishon, which is a sheila where the bishul akum applies when there's iroi. However, brewed coffee, it kind of depends on the coffee machine and how exactly it works, whether it's considered iroi or not. And it's at least Suffolk iroi what's going on in these coffee machines. So, Lamaisa, at the end of the day, we're going to be able to drink that coffee, but that doesn't necessarily mean that one should be drinking coffee at Starbucks, etc., because there's a lot of kashrus issues by drinking that coffee by Starbucks or other rest stops. So I would just say like this: there are heterim that we're talking about the kalim. A lot of times the kalim are washed together with non-kosher things in Starbucks and these rest stops, etc. However, I would say like this: there are heterim because usually we stam kliyan ben yoima, and we use soap, and therefore noisin tam lepagam, etc. In the places where you have from communities and easy access to coffee with no kashrus issues, that's what a good yid should do. If you're on the rest stop and whatever, so then you got to do what you do. One more heter, by the way: if it comes to you without milk, some say it's not a finished product, and when you add the milk, and that's like by these rest stops, it's without milk usually, and you add your own milk if you drink that, and therefore that might not be a finished product.
Whoa.
Sugar.
Coffee is coffee.
That's what I agree with you. I'm with you. I think it's a finished product, even without the milk. But there are those that say it. But I'm on board with you. I agree. One more thing. Once I mentioned Starbucks, I just thought something that people don't know about. That Lamaisa, there's a big shayla about drinking in a Goyish coffee house. Are you allowed to drink in a Goyish coffee house? Lamaisa, the Chida, the Arizal, and the Knesset Gedola say it's usher to drink in a Goyish coffee house. They would l'chayra hold it's usher to sit down in Starbucks, not to take it to go, but to sit down in Starbucks to have a coffee. L'chayra, that's what they would hold. Chachmas Adam says it's not a pure isser, but it shouldn't be done. And the Pri Chadash is Mekel and says you're allowed to drink coffee in a Goyish coffee shop. So that's just a different Gezerah Kufya Dalid. I know I just said it in short, but that's the idea. Yes?
Would that be